Hello all, students, faculty, staff, alumni, and others who participate in any of the following seminars with their camera on or use a profile image are agreeing to have their video or image recorded solely for the purpose of creating a record for participants in this seminar to refer to, including those enrolled students who are unable to attend. If you are unwilling to consent to have your profile or video image recorded, be sure to keep your camera off and do not use a profile image. Likewise, participants who unmute during the seminar or class and participate orally are agreeing to have their voices recorded. If you are not willing to consent to have your voice recorded, you will need to keep your mute button activated and communicate exclusively using the chat feature, which allows participants to type questions and comments live.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming. First of all, some bureaucratic note. Next week, we are going to have double features. At 11 a.m., Nobel laureate James Heckman from University of Chicago will present his paper. I still don't have his paper, so hopefully I will get it in the next few days. So his presentation will go from 11 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. And then at 12:55, our own Richmond, who is now present in this presentation, is going to offer his paper. Richmond is writing his thesis under the supervision of Professor Christos, and I'm also a member of the committee. As far as today's presentation, Milos Vulanovic was a student at the City University of New York. His PhD is from the City University of New York. He is a graduate of the Graduate Center. He is now an associate professor of corporate finance at EDHEC Business School in France. He is teaching various courses in various programs in EDHEC. He holds a PhD in financial economics from the Graduate Center, as I mentioned before, at the City University of New York, working under some professor from Baruch College. His prior teaching experience includes the City University of Hong Kong, Western New England University, Baruch College at City University of New York, Yeshiva University, Pace University, Lehman College, City University of New York, and New York Institute of Technology. His research includes empirical corporate finance, merger and acquisitions, venture capital, and special purpose acquisition companies, SPACs, and I think that we collaborated on a few papers dealing with SPACs.
That's exactly correct.
The other presenter will be Mirjana Cizmovic. She has a PhD. She is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Economics and Business at Mediterranean University in Montenegro. So Milos is in France, Mirjana is in Montenegro currently, and we are, of course, somewhere in New York and Philadelphia. Mirjana, besides teaching, she worked in the Central Bank of Montenegro, which I happened to visit there and spend almost a week. Then as an economic consultant for the government project financed by the World Bank, and as a financial analyst for projects funded by different international organizations, such as EBRD, UNDP. She was a postdoctoral researcher at ICEM, the Higher Institute of Economics and Management in Nice, France, a postdoctoral research at the Universitat Politecnica de la Marche in Italy. She was also a Fulbright postdoctoral researcher visiting me, invited by me at the City College of New York as a Fulbright scholar. This is how this paper started. Primary areas of her research interest are applied research in the field of international economics, macroeconomics, and developing countries' economic goals. I'm very happy that both Milos and Mirjana are here, and I'm really grateful for both of them for writing this paper. So I think Milos will start and Mirjana will continue, or vice versa. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Yohanan, for inviting us and for this announcement. It's a common work with Mirjana, Yohanan, and me. I would just add that not just two of us are going to participate. I was present at much of these seminars, so Yohanan was always asking questions. I kind of expect him to also be answering questions on the paper together with us, because he is good to addressing the questions. So I put him a little bit under pressure because I guess it's a time to put him a little bit under pressure. And thank you him again for this great seminar that he is organizing. Just to privatize a little bit, when I was the graduate student, my first seminar with him, it was also Yohanan organizing. He brought 4 Nobel Prize winners to the graduate center, and it was probably motivating for the students at that time, because graduate center was not that it was kind of a little bit rough place to survive it in this in the ages where I was there. So it was a little bit motivational. Okay, so let me just return back to the title. We're trying to see how these real effective exchange rates affect the industrialization. This is the paper is built on Mirjana's project, and actually most of the work she did. It's Yohanan and me that jumped in later, but for most of the empirical approaches, it's Mirjana what she did. Obviously, she would then be addressing most of these empirical questions and will help, but we came a little bit later, and we tried to explore how these exchange rates and the industrialization play together. It's not, I would say, fully causal study, but we try to do it the best we can. And we use the evidence from 25 post-communist Eastern European countries. Both Mirjana and me are from Montenegro, small country that is remaining part of the former Yugoslavia, belonging to these Eastern European countries, post-communist societies. And although Montenegro is dollarized, in essence, it has euro as the major tender. This is the question that is relevant for us living in the region. So hopefully we are going to have some implications, and we see some results. Okay. This is just like to introduce what we are going to do. Small background and motivation for the research. Objectives, how the data is obtained, methodology, results, and conclusion. Okay. What is the background for the research? We see that despite the big economic growth like that is happening over the last few decades, or even 6-7 decades in some countries, certain countries, even developing countries, have exhibited this decline in the share of the industrial production in GDP. I probably, at this age, I think like only few countries in the world are still having manufacturing as more than 50% of their GDP. I think China, I read somewhere that China is kind of going down below this 50% of GDP, okay? So it's a topic that is over there, as we can see, for more than 50 years, Kuznets in 66. And then there are like recent works by Herendorf, Timmer, Roddick, trying to examine this both in developed and the emerging markets, okay? So given that this is happening both in emerging and developed markets, we kind of literature is agreeing that the consequences for the economy are not necessarily the same. And we want to see how this, how the consequences play for our sample, for our set of the country. Primarily, is there the industrialization, and is this the industrialization connected with real effective exchange rates, okay? Now, just by definition, premature deindustrialization implies that decrease in the industrial productivity is happening before supposedly a country reach this optimal level of the industrial capacity, assuming there is one. My understanding is that the literature is not clear about this, is there is one optimal level. But there are like works, again, of Roderick, which is kind of a major author on which we based our study, and then there's Gupta and Singh and Macmillan and Roderick. Again. Now, if we want to think why there is this premature deindustrialization of developing country, there are like two explanations: trade and globalization. They all have their own way. How do they impact deindustrialization. The first is impact of the globalization, lower prices of the imports, lead to, I guess, consumption of these cheaper imported goods, and therefore they decrease the price, and therefore they increase the competition of, let's say, think about country, I don't know, like countries Montenegro or some other country where, according to our knowledge and according to the questions of the students, I guess everyone is thinking that these post-communist countries or communist countries were having outdated technology. This technological process get under strict or high competition, and this will kind of lead to deindustrialization and inability to compete in the market. So the question is, can government policy do something? I guess there are like two tools, fiscal and monetary policy, and the question here in our paper is, can this dynamic real exchange policy do something? Okay, now to bring a little bit motivation, how the different countries in this block look like. We presented two maybe I would say opposing examples of this deindustrialization. One is Uzbekistan, where from 1990 we see small peak, maybe it's even statistical error, but we see steady decline until 2017, and we see Czech Republic declining heavily until 1994, 1995, and then industrial production picking up. Okay, so the question is whether any of the shape of this curve is at least caused by the monetary policy or this real effective exchange. Okay, so here are like potential explanation why this industrial sector decreased. Transformation from old to the new economic system. Communism was replaced by market economies. This communism not only was the collapse of the system, but it was a lot kind of, it was a breakup of a lot of commercial ties. I can tell, for example, Yugoslavia was exporting and connected with Soviet Union, and a lot of exports were made for purpose for this country. The things were changing with the breakup of the communism, and a lot of these trade channels were suddenly stopped. So these firms who were having export connections were forced to find new ones or totally like disappear. And in this transition phase, we see a lot of kind of disappearance. We call this rigidity of these business structures, but simply many of the firms were not able to adapt to the new market conditions within their own countries, and especially in the competition in the global openings. Okay, so I guess that's a normal process. Just to again connect with the Yohanan seminars. I remember the first seminar that Yohanan was organizing was with a guy called Gomori from IBM. I think he was doing common paper in 2004 with Samuelson. And he came to the seminar with, at that time, revolutionary idea. And he was saying that trade is not beneficial anymore for the United States, that United States passed the kind of peak from which the trade is beneficial to them. And according to what he was witnessing at the point, that Samuelson and him and Baumol were kind of getting a lot of hate emails from commercial interest in the United States. I'm not sure like where the paper ended up, but to me it was interesting, and it was kind of something that post-communist countries experienced in the 90s. Maybe the US was experiencing in 2000 and the beginning of the 21st century. Okay. Now, these late 90s were more or less declining. We exhibited this decline in industrial production share, But after 2000, some of these countries picked up, and mostly the countries geographically located in Central Europe. I will call them, Mirjana probably knows the sample better than I do, but I would say Czech Republic, Slovakia, and countries like this, they exhibited the opposite trend and slight increase in industrial production. It could be due to investment, I can speculate, investment from various car makers, Chinese investment or something like this. Now, they also kind of, these Central European countries do exhibit gradual increase of participation in the global value chain. And these Central European countries, they kind of were enabled to have more diversified and more complex export basket of the products, which required more sophisticated technology. And I guess with this more sophisticated technology, they were at least able to compete outside of the bloc of these Eastern European countries, or maybe they were in the best position to export their products within the other kind of Eastern European countries. Now, motivation for research, theoretical motivation for research, obviously, like any of these papers that deals with real exchange rates and the devaluation, start with these Mundell models of currency union in 1962, 1960, and the various variations. The idea is that you can undervalue it, and this undervaluation would lead you to be more competitive in the foreign markets. And this competition in the foreign markets stimulates investment, increase production, and supposedly countries can competitively devalue. I'm not sure like how this game continues, but in essence, that's a standard view. And I think the politicians still do it. I hear it like in this American presidential election, there was a story, it's always kind of theme that you can do something by devaluing your currency, okay? Now, the question is how this plays out with the value of the imported capital goods. And then there is this effect is not kind of going in one direction, it's not unidirectional, but there are like disparate effects that depend on the economic development and this complexity. We are going to talk more about complexity. Probably Mirjana is going to pick it up. We think about complexity in two ways, following this Hausmann paper and also applying this, I think, Doyle-Farmer economic complexity index. Okay, so what is the research objective? We have, I tried at least to summarize it. I hope I did it. So the idea is to see, is there a long-term relationship between real exchange rates and industrial production for these 25 post-communist countries? If there is kind of connection, what is the magnitude? And then we see how the effect of this participation in the global changes the magnitude and shifts this industrial production. And we try to exploit various variations over there. Okay, now, how do we form the data and variables? Like for every empirical research, this is done by merging together as many available data sets as possible. So we take a look first with the industry value added share in GDP. Then majority of our real effective exchange rate statistics is used from this ZOLT database that is publicly available. It's posted on the web page. This ZOLT did two published papers, I think, and one working study. And the paper, this database is available. And the data statistics is available for every of these 25 countries. And then in addition to this, we use this set of the control variables. There is appendix in the table where we exactly say from which data source they are coming. They're just like general control variables, trade openness, gross domestic product per capita, share of GDP. They're coming from World Bank indicators, Human Development Index, or similar sources, okay? In addition to this, we are kind of, maybe this slide could be presented later, but after our initial tests, we do two real effective exchange rate proxies. The first is this bilateral real rate exchange, which is obtained from the standard PEN world tables and the World Bank. And the second one is misalignment to the real exchange rate from the long-term level aligned with the productivity growth. And I think this one is constructed by Mirjana. Yeah, it's
Yes.
not
Yes,
from anywhere. Okay. So in order to estimate this, we closely follow the model of Roderick 2008. We apply this augmented method technology to deal with the possible estimation problems, and then to kind of assess the impact of undervaluation or overvaluation. We replace the variables with two to kind of put them in between, okay? Maybe Mirjana can pick up and explain now better than I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to say hello to everyone, and thank you, Milos, for starting this presentation. Just if you can I share the screen or just use this one?
Yeah, you can share the screen again. I'll stop.
Okay. Sorry, just a minute. Okay, let's see where is the. Okay, I will just go speak a little bit about more about this proxies of real exchange rate that we used here. The first one is actually the bilateral exchange rate, which is the exchange rate between the national currency, which is in USA dollar, obtained from, as Milos said, from the PEN world table. And actually, this is calculated in a way that as a ratio of the purchasing power parity and exchange rates, which is defined as a ratio of the prices of the United States and one country by the country. So this is something what Roderick also used in his work, and we wanted to here to actually see this our applied methodology make different results compared to these works before done for transition and developing countries. The other one is the second variable is misalignment of real exchange rate. Here we didn't want to go to complex models to estimate misalignment. This is something separate work that we've done in another paper. But here we just wanted to see, is there some kind of influence of ballasted sumness and effect here for changing of effect of real exchange rate. Actually, is productivity which is calculated in this regression model for real exchange rate important for these differences of influence of exchange rate on industrial production. This is the main reason why we wanted to do this. One more reason why we took so many proxies, let's say, for real exchange rate is actually when you work research with developing countries, especially these countries, post-communist and transition countries, usually you need to obtain accurate data. And so by checking it with a lot of bases, maybe this is the more secure way to estimate our results. So how we did it to estimate this misalignment, actually, we estimated first the so-called equilibrium exchange rate. Actually, in our case, it is exchange rate which is aligned with the productivity growth, as I said. And it is easy arithmetical procedure. After that, we use the augmented mean group here. This is the same methodology that we use in the rest of our paper later, because we wanted to be sure that some issues like heterogeneity, endogeneity, etc., would not affect our results. At the end, to estimate misalignment of exchange rate, we actually subtracted from the actual values of real exchange rate this estimated equilibrium exchange rate. After that, what we wanted to see, is there any asymmetric effects? Actually, is there differences between overvaluation and undervaluation here? We formed two separate variables. The first variable is, we called it overvaluation because it's the best way to know what's happening. And this is the first variable for the periods where the overvalued exchange rate exists. In our case, that is the periods when our estimated variables is higher than 0. And after that, also we use the other one, what is the actually variables undervaluation, and check what is there higher influence or there is differences in these asymmetric effects between those two. So this is about our main independent variable, how we formed it actually. The base scenario that we started with is that to check that what was already, let's say, checked in other papers, is there any connection between the real exchange rate appreciation or depreciation and industrial production. Usually it was done in other papers, influence on the growth rate, but if we know that actually industry productivity is very important for the growth rate, this is some kind of the channel for the development of the country. So here, when we finish that base scenario, we will say later the results that we got. We wanted to see if there is any differences in these relations between exchange rate and the industry production, if there is some other variables that could influence this impact. If the country has more, if the country is have more complex export basket, does this magnitude deterioration changes? And the other thing that we looked for, that is our also research objective, was that we are, because a lot of these countries started to be the part of the global value chains, to see is there any influences of elasticity of real exchange rate in that situation. First, because of that, we needed more variables, let's say, which we checked for them, for if they're influencing the second part of our paper. First is economic complexity index. So we actually use database from economic complexity observatory. This is MIT observatory that they put a lot of for every country in the world. They're constructing these indexes, and why we actually use it, because we thought that this is some comprehensive measure of economic diversification and actually production capabilities of the country. And this is some way, it was shown in many papers that it is good, it is successful in explaining cross-country differences in economic growth and productivity, which is measured by, of course, GDP per capita, which is usually used as a proxy for the productivity. Next slide, we can see here how actually this economic complexity index is, we didn't put here formulas because we want just to intuitively tell you how it is formed, what it uses for construction of economic complexity index. The first export data are used in each country. Actually, this is the complexity of whole export sector, not product, but sector, export sector basket. It uses it is specific information uses on diversity and similarity of export products. So if the country has diversified export basket, as well as its export products produced in none or only a few other countries, then the country is on the top of the rank of economic complexity. So this is something what actually the capabilities of the production capabilities of the countries are looked using products that the country can export. So if country has this economic complexity index higher, compared to the one that we would expect according to GDP of the country, then it has huge higher potential for the future growth. So how does it can be explained? Actually, if we have countries that have higher economic complexity index, then the country has production capabilities that could be easily transformed to be used for production of products that would be more competitive on the market, if it does not doing at the moment. So actually, this index is based on the product space analysis, where everything is done on the way to see how production capabilities of the country can be changed, and on that way how can be used to spur competitiveness of the country. So we just put here, we didn't use the rank of the countries in the paper in the analytical part, but we just use index. But here we can see just a little bit where this country stands according to complexity ranking. Beside the countries that we use in our paper, which is 25 post-communist countries, we just put here some of the well-developed countries with a high level of complexity. And this is Japan. You can see here that's almost from 1990, it was in the first place, going up down, but this is on the top. Then the Germany, United States changed place from, let's say, from 9th place to the 11th, but it's again in the first 10 countries according to this complexity ranking. But what is interesting here is that these small countries in the Eastern Europe, or actually from Central Eastern Europe mostly, are on the 4th and the 7th place here in 2018. The other part, this is the part you see down, is Poland, Romania, Estonia, Croatia, etc. These countries here, they're actually not on the top, but again, they have on the higher level, let's say, of the complexity according on the global, if you rank all countries in the world. I didn't say at the beginning, the ranking goes from 1st to 134th place. So which countries has, let's say, the problem with this economic complexity? You can see here, this is a huge drop in Azerbaijan for 50 places from 1999 to 2018. Then a lot of these former Soviet Union republics, countries have the problem with the complexity. And usually they are now for the export of the commodities or the natural resources. We will see later how this influence in our paper real exchange rate, but per se this country complexity ranking is actually important to see how country can actually have what is the potential for country for future development. So later, as I said, the other part.
Sorry, Mariana, can you just switch to presentation mode to full screen? I guess, Professor,
okay, sorry. Okay. Yeah, it's better now. Okay. The other part that we use in our paper is actually to see is there a difference in estimates of magnitude of real exchange rate to industry production for different levels of participation in global value chain. Why we consider it important? Because we saw that in these Eastern European countries, especially Central European and Baltic countries here, the involvement in cross-border production was really high, and it's increasing especially from 2000. Just to not forget here, we told that there is a sample of 25 post-communist countries. It is consists of Central European and Baltic countries. Then the other part is former Soviet Union Republic countries, Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, etc. And then we also look at the countries from Southeast Europe, which is former Yugoslavia, some of the former Yugoslav republics, not all of them, and the other countries, actually those are countries from the Western Balkan region. Why usually, I think that maybe it was also one more question, why we didn't cover all the post-communist countries. It's a usual problem. Again, when you work with Eastern European region, there is no way that you can obtain all the necessary data for all the countries. Especially if we take Montenegro, for example, you have the data only from 2006 for all fundamental variables that you need. So this is usually the problem. So we try to make a sample as much comprehensive as we could and to get some accurate results and some precise estimates as much as we can. So this is just to know about which group of countries we are talking about here. So to actually estimate this influence of global value chain, we used some more. We needed some more variables. The first one is foreign value added. This is the measure of foreign inputs used in process of production of export goods. It is more as a downstream participation of global value chain or the backward linkages. The other one is the domestic value added. Is the measure of measures the values of exports, which is created using domestic inputs. If you sum these two, foreign value added and domestic value added, it will be the gross export of the country. Why we subtract them and why we look them separately, it is important because of this global value change and this production of intermediate products and actually trading intermediate products in this region. Third interesting variable needed for our analysis here is domestic value added, which is exported as an intermediate product to the trade partners, and it represents actually upstream position or participation in global value chains or the forward linkages. So we have the downward forward linkages. We look at the participation in global value chains. And also, we wanted to see not only how much country is involved in that production, international production, but also where it stands in that global value chain. Is that on the upstream or downstream, and what is the difference actually in this? How does it influence the elasticity of the exchange rate? In our case, that was the main question. So global value chain participation is calculated as the sum of forward value added, and this indicator domestic value added exported as intermediate products to the trade partners. That was the how we see how much countries are involved in production cross border, and position is calculated using the formula which is given here. Actually, if backward linkages are higher, then this global value chain position is decreasing and it is negative if it is higher than the forward linkages. On the other way, if the forward linkages in the country are higher than backward linkages, this position variable is positive. So it's because on the graph we will see how country stands on that way. So just to remember that negative position actually means the backward linkages, and the positive position means the more forward linkages in the country. Of course, we calculate it as a ratio of the gross exports to see the share of these variables. So let's see in countries what was happening in the period that we observed. We observed a period from 1995 to 2018. Just to say why we didn't maybe include from 1990, again because of data and availability of data. It is well known that we have the problem here, especially in Western Balkan. We have some political turmoils, wars, and other parts. And it was data, the transition, first period of transition data were not so well, and it is hard to gather them. Over the third period, as I said, 1995 to 2018, trade in intermediates for countries of Eastern Europe have become, as we said, successfully important. And what we have the noticeable differences in position among these countries that we looking at. So at global, if we look at them at all these three parts of the countries that we took in our research, we can see that on average, increase in participation index is actually accompanied with decrease in global value chain position, which means that they are more integrated through backward linkages. In the graph, you can see that there is global value chain participation goes from something about 20% to 80, more than 80, something like 85, I think that's 85.6 or something like that percent. This is the global value chain participation. And for those countries that have a higher participation, they are more integrated through backward linkages. And how it is actually, how it is in each part of these countries. We can see here on this slide, actually exporters from the Central Europe and the Baltic countries, which actually are called as leaders in transition. These are the countries in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Actually, from 2000, they're called as some leaders in transitions because of all the reforms that they made. They are located further downstream these global value chains compared to their partners. And this is the, as I said, Slovakia, Hungary, Estonia, Latvia, Slovenia, and actually mostly Central European countries. Why it is important for these countries? Backward means, as we said, the import forward value added is more present in the country, so they use the imported products to produce final products and or to re-export them to the other countries. So import in these countries was import of most higher value added components and industrial equipment, and they use them to production of intermediate or final, as I said, final goods. For these countries, it could be important because of the transfer of knowledge, which was embedded in these intermediate products that they actually imported in the country. So FDIs that they received, then these intermediate products, technological knowledge that they acquired, then skills that they actually acquired through this transfer was very important for to put these countries on the higher ladder of that economic complexity that we talked before, and you just saw that they had a higher rank compared to other countries. So for this post-communist, not only post-communist, but higher rank even on the global level. So if we look on the other side, the rest of our sample countries, we can see that most of them are located upstream in global value chain position. But let's say here we have to make differences of between upstream position of these countries and upstream position of the countries in developed world. Usually, when you say upstream position in global value chain in developed world, it means that one country is more in research and development and some, let's say, the far away from the final consumer. So in this case, it's not what is happening in this country. Upstreamness here is mostly because of export of commodities from these countries and their input of which are input in the production with other countries' industrial sectors. So this is not so well. This not contribute too much for the complexity of export of these countries. So it should be always taken into account when we look at, for that position in further analysis. So you can see here how this happens. Some of them have also some share of the backward linkages, but mostly, let's say, they're up on this global value chain. So this is the part. This is what we talked a lot about our variables that we used. This is descriptive statistics. We use the panel, of course, as for the in our analysis, panel analysis, but we put here just a simple average, just to see on average in this period what the main things about our variables. So industry production as a percentage of the GDP, this is the industry value added, as we said before, is a share of the GDP. Its mean is about 25, let's say 25%. But you can see that it was going from something around 9 to 60%. And this is the problem of this. We can say that could be a problem at the beginning of transition period, because these countries had over-industrialized their economies, but with the rigid business structure that could not be easily transformed to something what is asked in the open market and on the global level. So this is one of the specifics, that heritage of over-industrialization. That's one of the specifics of these post-communist countries. So if we look here at the real exchange rate, this is the three variables that we use for the exchange rate. On average, it's something about equilibrium. We expected on average that it should be on that level, but why we just show them in the presentation here is that you can see maximum level that in some cases, some countries, in some years, it was higher appreciation of the exchange rate, and that's for most of the time problem of these countries. And on the other side, if you look at the real exchange misalignment, I said before that if it is higher than 0, then there is overvaluation. If it is lower, it is undervaluation. Why this is, let's say, from these numbers, we can see that there was no periods from 1995 to 2018 of contractionary devaluations or contractionary, which could have some severe effects on the economy of the country. So more or less, that's about our, let's say, main dependent variable. GDP per capita, just as, here we can see that on average it was something close to 7,000, but it goes from something goes to 460,000. So just to see where these countries stand in the productivity compared to others. Trade openness is important here because we can see how these countries start from the period of transition, how they open their market. So in some periods, in some countries, it was only 50%. Trade openness is calculated here as a sum of export and import ratio of the sum export-import to GDP. So you can see that in some periods it was around 300 that ratio. So there were some of them are really open and liberalized their trade account. Economic complexity, there's two ways that we present it here. Maybe it is easier to see these normalized variables. Economic complexity goes from on the global level from minus 2.5 to plus 2.5. But in order to easier interpret it, we normalize it in the values from 0 to 1. And you can see that this is 0.63 on the average, which actually average is higher because we have some countries with that high values of economic complexity in our sample. Participation here is on average 60%. On average for all countries, but for some countries, especially countries in Central European region, the Baltic, it is around 85%. And backward and forward linkages are around 30%, but backward linkages, as we previously saw, more present in these countries, especially in countries with higher participation in this cross-border production. So we didn't put here all descriptive statistics, so just let's say main variables that we use here because it would be a really long table. So this is something what maybe is important, most important part, most important variables for our further analyzed. So how we choose the methodology here? Just see how, okay. Methodology we used because you see that we have some, our sample is very specific. We have some countries that experienced deindustrialization, and the other one that deindustrialization was in the first years of transition. After that, we have that U-shaped process. After that, we have reindustrialization, etc. So we have to look at the characteristics of the sample to choose the best methodology. This is something what is, let's say, normal. And we know that these countries are geographically located, that they are close to each other. So there is a mutual economic, trade, social relation between these countries in our sample. So we could expect there is a cross-sectional dependence for majority of our macroeconomic and fundamental indicators. So we have to check for that. This is the first part. After that, even though these countries in the region, they have the similar transition path, but we thought here changing for a communism system to the market economy, etc., even though they are comprised economically heterogeneous groups. So this is the other problem issue that could be a problem in our estimation procedure. Then, furthermore, these countries more or less globally integrated, not only countries of Eastern Europe, but we can say now all the country is a part of the global world. But here, as a part of Europe, Eastern European countries, that they are prone to some global economic changes and some shocks on the global level. That is called actually the strong factors. And they have simultaneously impacted all the sectors. What we wanted to achieve is to calculate how much each of the country is actually impacted by these global factors. So we actually use a methodology to achieve that goal. The basic equation of our interest, as we said before, is mostly follows the Roderick model for 2008 in the first classification, as I said, to start with. And it is adjusted to capture potential heterogeneity between the countries and these common dynamic factors. So this Bayesian specification is given here, that it's comprised of two parts. The first part of the equation actually represents the observable part of the model, and the second part is includes unobservable inputs. This observable part of the model, if you look here, this is our main the independent variable is real effective exchange rate. We already explained how we use the main one and the proxies. And the other one, CMI, actually is the coefficient with the vector of the control variables. In our model, we actually, the model allows that these coefficients, theta I and CMI, actually can vary between the cross-sections of panel members. In our case, these are these countries. And this is the first part. And the second part of the model, we actually calculated this common dynamic factor. And this is represent development of and level of country-specific weighted common factors that actually affected industrial production for all countries in the PAM. Let's just explain this coefficient here. The alpha I is the intercept, which actually means the time invariant heterogeneity. It collects that part. It's a time invariant part of unobservable part of the model, and the FT is the time variant. This is something what is modeled that actually collects the time variation in our sample for these 24 years. And this gamma is the coefficient which actually gives us explanation of this country-specific weights, how much these common factors actually affected each country in the funnels. So this the model is constructed in that way. This common factor, heterogeneous funnel common factor approach, and under this framing, let's say there is several estimators, and we choose the one which is more suitable for our case. It is the augmented mean group. Augmented mean group actually means by this estimator we try to resolve the issues that we said before. This is heterogeneity, cross-sectional dependence, and the presence of these unobservable inputs. So it is a technique which is developed actually by Eberhard and Thiel, and we follow this technique in our research. What is important, as I said, it deals with the dynamic funnel. It is actually the methodology is has two steps. First step, when you construct this model, is that you have actually the pooled funnel regression with first predicaments, and this regression is augmented with time dummies. And this difference time dummies that you have in the first.
I think Yanis has a question on the previous slide, so can you?
Okay, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Now, these two terms, like the alpha I, are like the time independent heterogeneity and the time dependent one. Is there a dynamics between the two, or because, or can you explain what the alpha would correspond to? Is it, for example, like geographic location, topography, like the fixed elements?
Yes, the whole unobservable part of the model actually means this is one. Let's say first to say this is one limitation of the study. We can't disentangle which is the exact factor. We know that this is a factor that globally affected all the countries and the moment. Usually these are global factors like financial crisis, like decrease of industry products on the global level, etc. And with one part of the model as FD actually takes that part of the model that is time invariant, and this the first part is, as you said, the geographic and something what is just heterogeneity, but it is fixed, not time variances. So this is the combination of these two, let's say, influences in this unobservable. We call it, of course, unobservable because it's not included as a main variable in the model. So there's some, let's say, advantages because it also covers some omitted variables to this part of the model. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So another question. How many time periods do you have? 20 years?
Yes, 24 years.
24 years, okay. And then in the observable part, you have psi, mi, x, mit. Are you implying that you estimate this model with one variable, one explanatory variable at a time?
No, we put a lot of control variables here.
Oh, so it's basically a sum over several variables that you
Yes, it's a vector of the several variables. We told, and some of the slides that Milos already said, we told that this is a lot of variables, different specification. In one specification, we took the variables like a GDP per capita, trade openness, then gross capital formation, and then a lot of them. And the other, maybe the other expanded model, we also included some variables, institutional variables like ICT, like rule of law, then I don't know, political stability, etc. So this is really a set of variables. Yeah.
I'm a little concerned that since you estimate a whole series of parameters for each country, if you have 24 years and you make the model a little too rich in the explanatory variables, then you might have trouble to find precise estimates for that.
Yes, but for basic specification, we have one main independent variable. Is four. I think that's the four control variables. And later, just to check this more robustness checks to see is there changing in the coefficient of our main variable, which is the real exchange rate. Here, we put more of them just to see is there any changes if we include or expand the model.
Yeah, I see. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So this is some about the model that we talked about in robustness part of our to see, because some problem with heterogeneity that could happen, which is always problem when we talk about real exchange rate. We also use the common correlated effects mean group, and it's the dynamic version extension of this model. And as the estimator, we used here not only OLS, but after that we used the two-stage least square GMM, just and used the larks and least variables as instruments. But we will show later results with that. It's just, but with this check, just to say, we didn't put all the control variables, we used just two of control variables beside real exchange rate, just to check his stability of the coefficient of real effective exchange rate in this case. So in preparation of our regression analysis, what we examined its properties, time series properties of our data. We use the range of the unitary tests. So the most important one, of course, is the first one, this second iteration of panel unitary test. This cross-sectional augmented Dickert-Fuller and correlated augmented Dickert-Fuller cross-sectional IPS test, which is recommended in this case because it actually removes the cross-sectional dependence. And also we checked with the first generation, but it's the both one tests these that I told before. After that, we said that we expected potential cross-sectional dependence between panel units, and we use PCR and the cross-sectional dependence tests. In this case, we actually estimated these alpha coefficients to see is there strong or the semi-strong or weak cross-sectional dependence, and to see does it have to be incorporated, accounted for in our model. Then we check for probability of the data, because this is the assumption of heterogeneity that we started at the beginning. And for that, we use the Anova test. This is the mean and quality, of course, and some formal tests, which is the test of statistics of parameter constancy, and raise the Zellner test of probability. This is because it is it is recommended to use this test again in case of variables are not stationary and if you have a small sample. As an informal integration test that is suggested by Anova Test, which is actually methodology that we follow here, is that we use the stationary tests for residuals after estimation. So co-integration is checked here after estimation, and we use the discount dynamic factor as a separate variable in the co-integration regression. In that case, tested it with a formal test, which means which we've written here, this is a Pedronical test, and the one which is maybe here most important, Westerwold, because it takes into account again cross-sectional dependence, which is accounted to bootstrapping procedure, and I think we use the 400 replications, bootstrap replications. So this is some preparation for the analysis just to test it. Is it methodology applicable in our case? We will not take too much time because this is just a test. This is the only some of them in the paper. You can find all the tests that we did. This cross-sectional dependence, if you can see from the table that for some again of our variables that exist cross-sectional dependence, and in case this is in our case it is a strong cross-sectional dependence according to this alpha coefficient that we found here. And also this is a probability test. We didn't put to the results of the test of the SWAMI test, the Roy-Zellner test, but it's also actually have the same conclusion that probability, that heterogeneity is present, so we couldn't rule out it from our sample. Also, stationarity and the level is our variables are non-stationary in the level and the stationary first difference. We did a lot of unitary testing. You can find it in the paper, so it's will be a long slides, so didn't put everything here. And more or less that's it for the pre-testing. And after that, we actually proved the co-integration that the long-run relationship between the exchange rate and industrial reduction exists in our sample that we looked for. Let's see. Okay, we have time. Okay, what are the main, let's say, empirical results that we got from our estimation procedure? As we said, the baseline was just to check is the situation in these post-conflict countries almost the same like in other transition countries. Is it aligned with one strand of the literature that says that under-relation actually is good, that promotes productivity in the industry sector, and on that way it promotes growth of the country. So it confirmed an expected relationship with developing countries and showing this negative impact of increased real exchange rate on the share of industrial production actually in total income. So estimated negative coefficient indicates that on average relative size industrial sector bends negatively or on appreciation and positively on degree of depreciation. So this is in line with a lot of other studies done from the developing countries. So it is written here for a lot of papers here. But what we will see later, that in these countries maybe the periods lowering appreciation on average. We're talking here on average because we still didn't incorporate the other factors, which is economic complexity and the global value chain, is maybe more important, this decreasing of appreciation. This is the main results table. So actually, I said most important before. Most of them here actually is some kind of robustness check. We didn't put all the control variables for some of our columns because to save space, let's say. In the first column, this is the basic classification that I already told about. In second and the third column, we actually separated our sample in the two parts, which is the part of more developed countries and the countries, upper middle income countries, according to World Bank classification. And it can be seen that loss of significance in the part of developed countries, which is something what is also confirmed by the other papers, that real exchange rate is not too much important for development countries, for developed countries or more developed countries. So, after that, we in the fourth column, I think that is additional control variables. That what we just wanted to check our coefficient here. And in the fifth column, we have this bilateral exchange rate, but without incorporating productivity or the Milos effect. It is also the negative coefficient. And when we used our estimation of the misalignment, we got almost the same results as in the first case. Again, something, as we followed the earlier, this is something that also he got the same estimations for different measures of the real exchange rate. And after that, we just used under-valuation and over-valuation as variable here. And we can see that over-valuation is more present in these countries. So lowering over-valuation is actually more important for to spur productivity than again, we say average on all countries in this region than under-valuation, which is the last part.
For the column 7 and 8, wouldn't you want to merge them? Because you're looking at asymmetry, right? So that the exchange rate should have a different slope depending on whether it's left or right from zero.
Yes. We use the dummy variables for this. We just use two separate variables here. The first
two dummy variables. Okay.
Yes. Two separate variables. We form them for over-valuation and for under-valuation here. So that's it.
Nice.
Okay. Empirical results. Well, here is not the next slides. We actually this is explanation that I've already said, so we don't have to be too much to take too much time on this. So actually, what also just from implication part we can say here, these results actually shows that appreciation and lowering of the appreciation is something that could be beneficial for the countries in this on average of countries in this region. And this result shows that but what we can let's say here that depreciation is should be the second best solution, because for dealing with big institutions and market failures, which is mostly pronounced in developing countries, it should be incentive for the first part of the good incentive for the increase in the return of capital returns and let's say emergence of new industries, but for the long run it should be replaced with good institutions and some market reforms. This is something what we also have to stress in this part. Okay, this is the same thing again, and this is the part that this is nothing actually something that this is not related to let's say this relationship between exchange rate and the industry, but this is this part that we could extract it from our model to see what is the effect of the common dynamic factor, and that indicates the important role of these unobservable inputs, such as common global shocks and price of industrial products, etc. I said before, this is some, let's say, limitation of the model, because we can, through this model, exactly determine which these factors exactly are. But we can say that they all impacted these countries at the moment, and it impacted these countries with different weights, as we saw in the equation before. This, of course, averages for the countries by the years here. And what is important, let's say that these global factors actually has negative impact of industry in this region. So this is one more factor that actually contributed to some deindustrialization process of the country. This is a global factor that actually country could not influence sometimes, that actually the shocks that affected all the countries in the region. As is written here, increasingly negative impact of external factors in determining industrial production we have here. So this is the baseline, let's say, specification. The other part that we have here is part that we said before that we wanted to see, is there influence, is there any differences between this relationship if we use if we introduce in our model some economic complexity index, and after that global value chain production. We said that the previous studies actually indicate as the country becomes more and more developed, a weakened exchange rate is actually less important as a development. We already in some way concluded it's in the first part. So as Roderick in his paper actually emphasized the positive roles of strong institution and the absence of market failures for industrial production, as well as for the growth of the whole economy. And he uses actually the industry sector as operative channel for the influence of real exchange rate to growth of the economy. And in here we wanted to see if we use some kind of more comprehensive measure instead of separately analyzing these all fundamental factors of economic growth, and we use the economic complexity index that we explained before at the beginning as a composite measure to proxy the level of development and some kind of level of the product specification in the country. We said if country has a more diversified export basket, and if the products that they export are unique or similar to one or just a few countries of the world, then this complexity index would be higher, and the country would be in the higher rank on the regarding this index. So what our results showed is that higher values of economic complexity index as a proxy for higher economic potential, as a better institution, that everything that I said before, actually that should diminish the real effective exchange impact of the share index, the GDP. Again, we expected something like this because we said it is a proxy for more developed countries. We introduced this variable as interaction with the real exchange rate. So that way we just calculated this threshold, let's say, value. In this case, this is for economic complexity index higher than 0.95. If you recall, we said that we normalize these values from 0 to 1. So this is the situation where the countries with really high rank of economic complexity. There are cases of developed countries with diversified industries and better position with high future economic growth. Then relaxation actually could have a positive effect on industrial structure of the country. So this is first, till this value, we have this marginal effect of decreasing marginal effect, and after that we have the positive effect of the appreciation. Conversely, for less developed countries and the countries with less diversified industries, less sophisticated exports, we could expect that depreciation is more important for the development. Some kind of intuitive explanation of this, of course, is that higher sophistication actually means also the involvement in global value chains and everything. So there's a higher importance of the cheaper imports in these countries, especially in these countries of Central European and Baltic region. So this is something what we got here. So if you look at this, is the first one, affiliation. This is something what I said before. And also we separately looked for this participation and this foreign value added and this backward and forward linkages. And you see here that we actually introduced all of them as an interactive component of our model. I will say later, and common time factor is also present here. So the results are here for the other part. We can say the usual gains for global value chain participation from backward linkages for developing countries include actually the high productivity from application of foreign technology. As I said, through the import of intermediate products, which are technologically on a higher level than country produced before, they acquire the knowledge and acquisition a lot of new skills. So for the countries, again, for Central Europe, the main channel for knowledge acquisition is technology transfer to intermediate inputs. And companies which are involved in global value chain actually benefit directly from this new technology. While we can suggest the other countries, there are some researchers that actually confirm that the companies to the externalists in the country, they're not part of global value chains, can acquire indirectly the benefits from knowledge spillover through this production networks back in country, that they're not part of global value chain, but the transfer of the knowledge could be part of, could be in the country. And so we can see here the participation global value chains can actually affect the elasticity of real exchange, effective rate elasticity of export. And it is proven that when a country production is more integrated, then real exchange depreciation improves the competitiveness only of the domestic part of the final goods. So the participation actually decreases elasticity of the manufacturing exports. So we can expect here that this is the situation also for Central Europe, mostly again for Central European countries. And we can say what we got from our results is that higher global value chain reduces this negative impact of real exchange, expected real exchange increase on the industrial sector share in GDP. And again, because we put it as a interactive part of the model, then we can say that this threshold of GDP participation is 65%. So up to this value, real exchange rate has a negative marginal effect of industrial production, but again, positive one after that. Why it is important for this country? Again, this is different way of production. They transform their productive capacities, and again, part of the foreign value added or the part of the intermediate inputs are much more important for them, as because this participation is higher than domestic value added is lower, and real exchange rate elasticity also the real exchange rate do not affect this part that way like it should be when we don't have these international production chains. So real exchange depreciation can be less effective for industry promotion in all the impacts domestic value added when you have high share of gross value added share of gross export. When we wanted to see, we said that the participation is important, but also let's see position and that global value chain. What's happening with the countries with more backward, what's happening in countries with more forward linkages. Increasing forward value chain gross export actually should reduce the negative impact of depreciation of the industrial production. We got that this threshold of 33% of the gross export, and this, by results of our study, real exchange rate appreciation reduces the cost of intermediate imported inputs. So this is actually also the positive effect for whole economy to the multiplicative effect again of externalities and effect for the skills and for the knowledge acquisition. This is the main results. So for the end, we want to just to see what to cover up to conclude, let's say, for all this our story today. So we can say that what happened during the transition period is the new industries actually emerged in these countries. Then the relation between the share of countries' export and import of intermediate products has been changed. And in this change condition, this conventional analysis of real exchange rate influence of industrial production should be changed, and should be changed the role of depreciation with the growth promotion. What I just not said before, here we use the real effective exchange rate as we said from the results database here. There is some tries to let's say determine the real exchange rate wherein the indicator is included global value chains. Some let's say call it real exchange rate global value chains, which means that actually it don't have to be imported on a way that you put some independent variables later in the estimation process. But we had a problem here for these countries because this is done on the micro level for different industries, and we didn't have the data for that, so we actually use it on this way to introduce it in our analysis. Our baseline results actually reports that there is a negative relation on average between the exchange rate changes and the share of industrial production in GDP. And when effects of product sophistication and participation is not included, not taken into account. And this is something what confirmed the main results of export growth, which means that appreciation is beneficial for growth promotion. Then we can say that examine how this relationship changed if we account for multiplication, economic complexity, and the international production chains, and establish that relation between the real exchange rate and industry production is weaker in countries with a higher economic complexity and export sophistication, which exhibit lower negative consequences when the exchange rate appreciates. This is the first part. Also, we saw that this deeper integration into global value chain lessens when we have lessens the negative effect of appreciation in industry production. So research confirmed that real exchange rate impact on industrial production depends on the country's position in the industry cross-border production, and indicated negative consequences of appreciation is less pronounced in these more developed countries with higher value of backward linkages. Policy relevant implications here should be the one of them is important. Is the most important part, maybe because we usually evaluation can be used also as a policy tool, as it can be a result of the fundamental variables, change of fundamental variables in the country, but it also can be used as a policy tool. It is important to emphasize that this is again the second best solution for growth promotion. We stress that several times because, as I said, it is used as an incentive at the beginning of the period, and it actually leads to some structural changes in the country, transforming, redistributing capital from the some non-productive or non-tradable sectors to tradable. So for some period it is okay, but for a long period it can be some consequences of the economy already known. For a long period of undervaluation, it could be inflation, etc. So at the same time, the elimination of market distortions the best strategies, which is not actually easily implemented to these developing countries. And we can say that these reforms implemented in these countries in different pace, which actually led to different industry structures and different levels of countries' development. And I think this is the last part. Differences across countries are important actually factor for policymakers to have considered when discussing the implications of real undervaluation of industrial production. So if these parts are not taken into account, level of sophistication and then level of global value chain participation, actually effects of some policies could be wrong, because regular models which do not take this into account could actually lead to some actions which will not have the effects that policymakers needed. Okay, this is thank you for our side for presentation. This is it. I don't know if Milos has something or Johan to add.
Okay, any questions?
Nothing, maybe Johan has.
No, I just want to put some questions that we got from the student. Maybe you can look at them.
They are, the questions are actually in the next slide, in the continuation of the slides, yeah?
We just put it, all the questions.
Oh, okay.
I thought it would be easier to put it all in the slides. So okay. Okay, should I start or?
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay. Okay, just a minute to drink a little water. I was talking too much, sorry. Okay. And this is the start with we received a lot of questions from students. You know, that's I think we'll try to address as much of them as we can today, but of course they can approach us later. For this month we don't have time too much for that. So let's say the first question from the student was in developing countries, the industrialization started to occur even before the manufacturing sector reached the right stage. This is something from our paper. In the paper, actually, globalization is the one of the reasons. How much did globalization often developing countries mark? First, let's say, what is the influence on globalization on this premature industrialization? Because actually this is the definition of premature industrialization. Why globalization is important for, why this is one of the reasons. Actually, globalization is bring some changing in technology. So it, on the global level, we have the labor saving technologies, and that is something what was actually a problem for the newcomers, the new market economies, because we have this in this case changing for the communists to some market economy to timely transfer their businesses on that way to reach that level of productivity in the industry sector. That was the problem for industrialization part. They didn't have a chance to go through all the stages like developed countries, you know, agriculture, labor-intensive industry, etc. But they just jump on the global market at the moment. They have to somehow find a way to be competitive, and it was one of the problems. How much open developing countries market globalization, of course, when you now we can say this is actually the globalized world, and the problem, the other was decreasing of the from the globalized market, increasing of industry products prices, and this is also the problem for the export for newcomers, or let's say on that market. So I don't know, Milos or something. Do you have to add something for this first question or no?
All fine.
No, okay. Then we have the second question. I hope it's explained. The first one. The second is for the developing countries that open their markets. They did have time for their first to be competitive in the global market. If not, why? Partially, I already answered that. What was the problem here? As we said before, we have the transition economies. They have to change all these business structures. It was said at the beginning before that these companies were actually focused on the internal markets and the market between these countries. So they have to change this business structure, and they most of them have over-industrialized their industry. This is big plants and factories that have to be that is not easy to change to be to actually produce some more sophisticated products that was asked in the market here. So the time because here we have to look at long this is period. So how long short run, long run here is even longer because we need to transform the capital that they use or some other way of using it for production. So you know that for this transformation we need much more time. So this is the problem.
Mirjana, you have a question on the chat. Could you look at it for a second? The last one.
I can't see the chat with my.
Yeah, so the question is, can we use, could you use financialization as a proxy for deindustrialization, where financialization is defined as financial sector share of GDP? That's from Mina Doiran. She's professor at Lehman College.
Milos, could you just...
Yeah, she said, can we use financialization as a proxy for deindustrialization?
Mm-hmm.
Financialization is defined as financial sector share of GDP.
Financial share sector of GDP, yeah, we can as a part of it, but in these countries we have to talk about whole industry sector. So then this is something because this is very diversified, let's say, countries. So we have in the sector which still have manufacturing and assembling and etc. So this is. I know, Milos, do you have something to add?
Oh, maybe Yochanan.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think you can use it. I don't think it will be the same. So all of those countries at the beginning, in the 1995, 2000, the financial sector was not as developed as today. So it's increased the problems of endogeneity and so on.
Because you went there to Ukraine and Poland when they were actually breaking up communism. You should know, like.
Right. So in 1994, I was, advising the presidential office of President Kuchma, president of Ukraine, and of course we tried to do a lot as far as improving their financing and improving their central bank and so on. But it was a tough job and not successful at the end. So yes, it's a possibility. I don't think it will really represent globalization in some respect, because export was much faster developing than the financial sectors, because there are too many people that are invested in the banking system and in finance in general. So this is where you can get a lot of rent, whereas the export and import was less difficult to penetrate. You have another question about ECI?
Yeah,
do you see it?
There is Radoslav Dimitrich. He is asking a question or is stating, ECI is a numerical value based on diversification, but how do you compute it?
Is it by a formula?
We didn't put there's several formulas to compute it, but we could refer him. I did forget the name. Sorry, I didn't hear well. The Atlas Observatory, Economic Atlas Observatory, where you can find exact form. But as I said before, we for the calculation of the economic complexity index, they use all the export data. First is calculated the product complexity index, and after that, this complexity index of each product is used for calculation for complexity of whole export baskets. And what is important is that not only that you have the products that are sophisticated, let's say on the global level, it is also important that the country has diversified exports, and these products that produce country that are produced in some country only, let's say, could be not, it could be unique, let's say, not unique, but could not be produced by so many other countries. So because of that, this is a way that through the products of the export basket, you can actually somehow figure out the capabilities of the country, because you need higher, more sophisticated technology, you need more knowledge, more skilled workers in case when you produce this kind of the products. That is something. But exact formula, I should write it so that if it is, I can explain it.
Okay, let's move to question 3 on the slides.
Okay. There's the question, some countries, especially for those countries where economies have relied on exporting goods, they control the exchange rate internally. Can it be one example of that causes indigeneity? Of course, always when we talk about the effective exchange rate, it's a problem with indigeneity, because the countries using a lot of policies, especially can be used in monetary fiscal policy, etc., to somehow influence the exchange rate. But as I said before, exchange rate is also the consequence of changes to some fundamental variables. Actually, it is it represents ratio of productivity of the tradable and non-tradable products, and also it is something. It is indicator that gives information about the ratio of export-import prices. So as it is a variable that could be implemented, could be, let's say, result of some kind of economic policy, and also it could be when you target this variable, and the other way it can be a result of some changing in the country when you change some fundamental fundamental variables in the country, as I said, productivity of these sectors, etc. Yes, it could cause indigeneity, and this is the reason why we put too much efforts in our study to try to control for it. The first one, indigeneity, is indigeneity that we from the unobservable part of inputs, which is actually covered by the first part of the model, which is augmented mean group model that we use here. And after that, in the robustness part, we use two dynamic models, dynamic coming correlated effects, and we estimated our coefficients using two-stage least square and GMM, and using some instruments to be sure for this kind of indigeneity raising from reverse causality, let's say, in our case. So we used a lot of the, of course, of dependent variables. So this was actually to try to cover it, and we got almost the, let's say, same results as the baseline. So I hope so.
Okay, you have another question on the chat. Okay. Milos, do you want to read it?
Yeah, it's a more a statement, or Radoslav is saying GVC position seems to be a measure as to how far are different economies from those who are high exporters, for which GV position is 0. So it's a more kind of statement than a question.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to the next slides, maybe.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. We have the here a question just enough time. This is the question, one question, I will read it, okay. As Eastern European still faces many challenges in terms of economic development amidst an ongoing process of deindustrialization, what alternatives can be explored for fostering economic growth and strengthening its value chains, especially for countries with low complexity? What effects can persistent currency overvaluation have in the future for these economies? Okay, the first part is, as I understood, what alternatives can be explored for fostering economic growth for these countries. As I said, the main question in our research was how real exchange rate can be, let's say, used, but how can it somehow spur the productivity in the industry sector. But besides this part, what was the, let's say, problem with these countries? I think the one question later also is related to this, is that at the beginning of transition process, all these countries started, as we said, from the communist to multi-market economy. So they what was important is actually contribute to, let's say, the market economy was something they implemented horizontal economic policy, which actually simultaneously affected each economic sector. This is the first part. What was the problem in the industry sector? In the industry sector, there is a sector which is really prone to institutional and a lot of market favors. Without implementing any sectorial policies, it could be the problem. What was problem in these countries? We already talked about that, the rigid business structure, something over-industrialization, very hard transformation, and the sector, something like that. Some of these countries actually started, again, Central European or the Baltic countries, they started to implement these sectorial policies, actually to be more, let's say, more directed in some sector of the industries. But what we have now is something what we call the new industry policy. Actually, not just to choose sectors on some random way and to say, okay, we will explore competitiveness of this sector, but actually to find or to map these sectors with the highest capabilities for the production of competitive products. And after that, to actually somehow start to somehow to make them products, help the products be more competitive by the use of some economic policy. This is something what would be, let's say, from my side, let's say something, except this part from the exchange rate, important for these countries of low complexity. As we said, for economic complexity index, look at that, look at the index, see where the country is, and when you see where the country stands for, you see what are the capabilities that can be easily transformed again to produce something for what country could be have the most competitive on the global level. So what effects of the persistent currency valuation we have in the future for these economies depends which part of economies we look here. Persistent undervaluation, persistent overvaluation, again, isn't something what is actually is not good for these countries which are with low complex industries, the less developed countries. We can say that is something they will actually miss this part of incentive of depreciation in some periods to overcome these institutional failures and market failures that they have. And for other parts, persistent overvaluation, I don't know, it depends how they will develop. And for now, some of them, it is good to have a little bit appreciated exchange rate because, as we said, they import a lot of intermediate products, and this is something, and they don't have a lot the part of domestic value added is not such big as it was before. So that's just
Mirjana, there is another, Radoslav is extending his question, so maybe Milos, you can read it.
Yeah, I can read it. The essence of the question is the variability of the spot estimate is kind of high, And he thinks it would be better to kind of, for that reason, we cannot draw a reliable conclusion on the group as a whole. So would it be better to group into smaller subsamples that are more homogeneous? Maybe Miriam is going to answer, but my first gut is that we ask actually for heterogeneity, at least to get good regression estimates, but I'm not sure, like, should we group them to have more homogeneous kind of subsamples and then estimate it? Would we have better result? So
okay, so I just sorry, Milos, just the problem with heterogeneity was the first problem that we said before, and because of that, we actually implemented this methodology that give us the estimates of the coefficients that vary between the countries. Actually, what we got in the result, the final result, is the average of this estimate. This is a mean group. But it is the augmented mean group, augmented with this time varying dummies in the first part of the model. So actually, when you're doing research, you can look at each of the countries or estimate what's happening in each of the countries. And in the first part of our research, we actually split our sample. If you recall, in some of these results, we put the part of the Central European and Baltic countries, which are, let's say, more homogeneous, and the other part, which is the less developed. So this is or to check the results, and later we actually saw that there is what's happening is actually that this higher complexity of developed countries actually is something what actually influenced this effect of exchange rate. So that's
okay, good. So if you can stop sharing, Mirjana,
okay.
And we are at the end of the seminar, and I would like to thank everyone who participated. Professor Christos cannot attend, unfortunately, but again, I would like to thank everyone who came. I want to thank the speakers, Milos and Mirjana, and again, see you next week at 11 a.m., where James Heckman is going to present from University of Chicago, and later on from our student Richmond. Thank you for participation. Thank you for Christine for organizing everything. And hopefully all of us will rejoin in a week. Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you, Yohanan. Thank you, Mirjana. Thank you, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right. Happy holidays, like happy Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be careful.